My heels clicked like a metronome against the polished marble of the downtown lobby as I checked my watch for the third time. It wasn't even noon, barely enough hours in the day to warrant my early escape from work. Yet a knot in my stomach urged me toward home, the modest colonial in Willow Creek where my parents still lived and where, for reasons I couldn't quite name, I suddenly needed to be. I'd left a board meeting in mid-sentence, my boss raising an eyebrow as if I'd just confessed to a crime. Maybe it was the migraine pressing behind my eyes. Maybe it was the quiet, persistent thought that something was off. The September air was warm enough to tease the scent of damp leaves and asphalt as I pulled into our driveway. That's when I saw it. The front door propped wide open, my mother's laughter carrying through the breeze like a bell. I stepped inside and froze. There, in the living room, surrounded by half-collapsed cardboard boxes, stood my parents, Mom's auburn hair frizzing from a humidity, Dad's old college sweatshirt dusted with packing tape. And in those boxes my books, my framed photos, the blue ceramic mug I'd bought at the flea market last spring. Surprise, Mom chirped, waving a roll of bubble wrap like a party streamer. We thought we'd help you pack. Your little studio will feel cozy once you move in. My heart punched against my ribs. Studio? I hadn't agreed to move anywhere. I was 21 the night everything cracked open. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and the faint, dry scent of cardboard, my mother's favorite cleaner, and a dozen moving boxes she hadn't bothered to hide. Brooklyn's too expensive for you, Olivia, Mom said, her arms crossed, voice sharpened with that steel edge she used when she was scared but pretending to be practical. I tightened my grip on the mug of chamomile tea I'd brewed to steady myself. Steam curled against my cheek, but my hands still trembled. I never said I was moving. Why are you packing my things? Dad looked up from the stack of sweaters he was folding my sweaters and wouldn't meet my eyes. His silence hurt worse than words. Mom finally exhaled, a heavy sigh that seemed to carry years of disappointment. Your father and I found a studio for you, tiny but safe. You'll be closer to work. You need to start your own life. Start my own life. The phrase stung like a slap. As if the life I'd been building, graduate school applications half finished, late nights volunteering at the gallery, wasn't my own already. You're kicking me out, I whispered. The lump in my throat burned. No, Dad said at last, his voice barely audible. We're helping you transition. I wanted to scream, but the anger tangled with heartbreak until I could only stand there, swallowing the bitter taste of rejection. My fingers ached around the mug. I set it down before it shattered. From the hallway, a soft creak. My grandmother, Eleanor, had been living with us since her hip surgery. She stepped into the light, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. Liv, she said gently, using the nickname only she dared. Her eyes held a calm defiance I'd always admired. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pressed something cool into my palm, a small brass key on a faded blue ribbon. This was my studio key, she said. Back when I painted every day. Whatever door you open with it, literal or not, make sure you choose it. I clutched the key, its edges biting into my skin. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of control. I straightened, met my mother's wary gaze, and said, Fine, I'll move out. But on my terms. Eleanor's small nod was almost imperceptible, but it steadied me. That brass key was more than metal. It was the first proof that I could unlock a life of my own making. I still remember the first morning after I left. The city air felt different, sharper, like it carried both warning and promise. I stood outside the tiny apartment I'd managed to rent with the last of my savings, clutching the keys in a palm slick with sweat. The walls inside were bare, the radiator hissed like an irritated cat, and the mattress on the floor sagged as if it, too, was exhausted. But for the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of someone else's plans pressing against my chest. I took a job at a neighborhood cafe while finishing my graphic design courses online. The early shifts were brutal, 4 a.m. wake-ups, the scent of roasted beans clinging to my hair and clothes, the ache in my shoulders after hours of steaming milk. Yet each latte I handed across the counter felt like a quiet promise to myself. I'm building something that's mine. A few weeks in, I met Dana, One of those women who carry their confidence like an invisible crown. She was a regular, always in a navy power suit, always ordering a double espresso before her morning meetings. One sleepy Tuesday, she noticed my sketchbook open behind the register. "You drew these?" she asked, eyes narrowing with curiosity. I nodded, embarrassed. "These are good," she said, flipping through the pages with a practiced eye. "Ever thought of doing real branding work?" I told her about my online courses, about how I wanted to build visual identities for small businesses. Dana's smile was quick but warm. "Come by my office tomorrow. I run a boutique marketing agency. We need fresh eyes." That night, I barely slept, rehearsing every possible conversation. The next day, Dana introduced me to her team and handed me a test project. It was just a logo redesign for a local bakery, but when the client approved my draft without a single change, something inside me clicked into place. Months rolled into a year. Under Dana's mentorship, I learned to pitch clients, to negotiate contracts, to hold my ground when people doubted a young woman's worth. There were long nights when my eyes burned from staring at screens and mornings when self-doubt whispered that I'd made a mistake. But each small victory, a glowing client testimonial, a second project referred by word of mouth, stitched a layer of confidence over the raw parts of me. When Dana offered me a partnership stake, I nearly cried. Instead, I shook her hand and smiled through the storm of gratitude in my chest. Meanwhile, my parents' calls became predictable check-ins, casual questions, carefully avoiding the topic of my career. I kept my answers polite but vague, the way you might speak to distant relatives. They thought I was scraping by in some anonymous design job. I let them think that. By the time our agency landed its first national campaign, my quiet little life had transformed. Behind the scenes, I'd built not just a career, but a safety net no one could pull out from under me. And I wasn't ready to share that secret, not yet. I heard the shuffle of hesitant feet before I even opened the door. The elevator chimed behind them, its polished brass doors reflecting three familiar faces I hadn't seen together in years. Mom clutching her cardigan like a shield, Dad standing stiff as if bracing for a courtroom verdict, and my older brother Jason, hands shoved deep into his jeans pockets, avoiding eye contact. For a heartbeat, none of us spoke. The city skyline stretched behind me like a painted backdrop, all burnished gold from the late afternoon sun. I'd left the French doors open, and the scent of the white lilies on my console table drifted through the room, a quiet, defiant sweetness. Mom's voice cracked first. "Lila, we didn't expect this." Her eyes swept over the open-plan living room, the honeyed oak floors, the abstract art on the far wall, the glass shelves lined with books and framed photographs. I almost smiled. They'd braced themselves for a cramped studio with peeling paint and second-hand furniture. Instead, they found a corner penthouse in Tribeca, the kind of place they used to point at during family trips and say, "People like us don't live there." Jason whistled low, a sound that carried both disbelief and a hint of something sharper. Envy, maybe. "Nice place." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. I didn't invite them to sit. Instead, I let them wander, let the silence do the work. The muted ticking of the minimalist clock on the wall seemed suddenly loud. Dad finally cleared his throat. "Lila, we were worried. You never told us how you were managing." I caught his gaze and held it. The man who once said I'd never make it on my own suddenly looked small against the expanse of floor-to-ceiling windows. "You mean," I said softly, "how I was managing after you packed my life into boxes and told me I'd be better off starting over in a shoebox apartment?" Mom winced. Her fingers tightened around her cardigan. "We thought we were helping. You were so young. We didn't want you to fail." I finished for her. The word tasted metallic, like biting my own tongue. Jason leaned against the marble kitchen island, his knuckles white. "Come on, Lila. They thought you'd drown out here. So did I." I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling shelves, running my fingers lightly over the spines of my own published books. "There's Always Another Sunrise," the title of my first bestseller, caught the fading sunlight. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice calm. "You were right," I said. "I did drown. For a while. And then I learned to swim without you. I turned, meeting their eyes one by one. I built this. The publishing company. The 3 novels. The speaking tours. The penthouse. I gestured toward the sprawling view of the Hudson. All of it. On my own. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad blinked like he'd been struck. I wanted you to see it, I continued. Not because I need your approval. God knows I stopped chasing that years ago, but because you need to understand something. I'm not the girl you tried to move out of her own life. I'm the woman who owns it now. Jason shifted uncomfortably. You're the owner? Of what? The publishing house. The entire imprint, I said, letting the words settle like the final note of a song. Silence. The kind that rearranges old hierarchies. Mom finally whispered, almost to herself. We didn't know. I know, I said, softer now. And that's exactly the point. The late sun dipped lower, turning the river copper. For the first time, I saw something unfamiliar flicker across my father's face. Not just pride or shame, but recognition. I let the silence stretch until it pressed against the walls, heavy and deliberate. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint tick of the grandfather clock near the window. My mother shifted in her seat, the leather squeaking under her nervous weight. Dad cleared his throat, but no words followed. For the first time in years, they looked small. Not the towering figures of my childhood, but 2 people, uncertain, guilty, and suddenly aware that the daughter they had once tried to pack into a shoebox of their own making had outgrown every corner of it. I rested my hands on the polished edge of my walnut desk, the gold ring on my finger catching the late afternoon light. You came here, I began, my voice even, because you thought I couldn't handle my life. Because you assumed I'd failed. You started packing my things without asking, because you believed I had nothing worth protecting. My mother flinched at the word packing, as if hearing it aloud made it uglier. But you were wrong, I continued. I built something on my own, and I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to set the terms if we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward. My father finally looked up. His eyes, once sharp with quiet judgment, were dulled by something like remorse. What terms? He asked. I leaned forward, my voice soft but firm. First, honesty. No more secrets. If you're worried, you ask me. You don't show up and decide what's best for me without my voice in it. That ends today. My mother's fingers twisted in her lap. We only wanted. I know what you thought you wanted, I interrupted gently. But wanting to protect me doesn't mean you get to control me. They exchanged a glance. Dad gave a slight nod, as if conceding the first point. Second, I said, choosing my words carefully, you need to start pursuing the dreams you shelved when you were my age. Mom, you still talk about that bakery you once wanted to open. Dad, you always wanted to write that history book. Stop waiting for some perfect time. If I can build a life from scratch, you can at least give your own passions a real chance. My mother's eyes softened, a flicker of something, hope, maybe, surfacing beneath her shame. And third, I added, if you want to be part of my world now, you must respect it. That means respecting my space, my work, and the choices I make, even when they don't fit your plan. I'll invite you in, but you don't get to rearrange the furniture anymore. Silence again, but this time it was different. Lighter, like the air before the first drop of rain. Dad leaned back, his shoulders loosening. You're right, he said finally. The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a door closing and a new one opening. My mother reached across the small coffee table and, hesitantly, placed her hand over mine. Her palm was warm, trembling. We didn't see you, she whispered. Not really. We see you now. I exhaled, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The power was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about setting us all free. For the first time, it felt like we were finally meeting as equals. The following spring, the Carter house, my parents' house, looked different. Not in its bones. The white clapboard siding still shone against the emerald Kentucky hills. But something softer lingered in the air, like the scent of fresh linen after a hard winter. My father, usually glued to the news, now met me on the porch with a canvas tote of seed packets. "Planning a garden," he said, almost shyly. His eyes searched mine, waiting for approval instead of handing down judgment. Inside, Mom was at the dining table, her hair pulled back with a scarf the color of sunrise. A notebook lay open, pages filled with sketches of a community art project she'd proposed at the library. The woman who once called my ambitions a phase now spoke about her own as though dreams had no age limit. I wandered through rooms once heavy with silence. Their laughter followed me, a gentle ripple where there used to be a dam. When I reached my old bedroom, I paused. The walls were bare, the posters and photographs of my teenage years had been carefully boxed, but on the desk lay a single item, the brass compass Aunt Jo had given me the night I left. Its needle gleamed, catching the afternoon light. I picked it up and smiled. That tiny compass had steered me far beyond miles, past fear, past resentment, toward a self I'd once only imagined. From the hallway, Mom called, "Clara? We're heading into town for ice cream. Join us." I slipped the compass into my palm, the metal warm from the sun. "I'll be right there," I said. For a heartbeat, I stood at the threshold, breathing in a house that once felt like a cage and now, strangely, like a place where growth could root. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I thought of the girl who'd driven away years ago with trembling hands and a suitcase full of doubt. I wished I could tell her that the road ahead, winding and relentless, would lead not just to success, but to a deeper kind of peace. I turned the compass over, Aunt Jo's inscription catching the light, "Find your true north." A quiet certainty settled in my chest. I had found it, and for the first time in years, I stepped out of that house not to escape, but to stay.